Hey there, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we are going to completely reframe something you've probably felt incredibly guilty about your entire life. We're going to dive into some fascinating neuroscience to completely dismantle a label you might have quietly accepted for yourself. If you've ever struggled to just get started on something important, what we're unpacking today is going to totally change how you view your own mind. Let's start with a very specific, incredibly heavy feeling. You know exactly what I'm talking about, right? There's something you need to do. You know what it is. You've probably known for a while. You might even be sitting right at your desk right now. Your laptop is open. Your to-do list is staring right back at you, and you are just not doing it. And it's not that you don't care, and it's not that you lack the time, but suddenly you're scrolling on your phone, or you decide you absolutely need to organize your entire kitchen right this second. And in the back of your mind, this dark little thought creeps in. You tell yourself that you just lack discipline, that you're just lazy. So why aren't you starting? I want to assure you right now, this is absolutely not a dramatic failure. This isn't a character flaw. What's actually happening is that your brain is running a very old, deeply ingrained protection program. It's a defense system your nervous system learned a long time ago, honestly, long before you even knew what a project deadline was. Once you understand what your brain is actually trying to protect you from, this whole paralyzing experience starts to make a completely different kind of sense. Okay, let's dive into section 1, the myth of laziness. Think about this for a second. The brain's default state is energy conservation, not productivity. Your brain is a massive energy drain. Despite making up only about 2% of your body weight, it consumes roughly 20% of your body's total energy. Because of that massive metabolic cost, evolution specifically optimized our nervous systems to conserve energy whenever physically possible. So neurologically speaking, your brain just isn't wired to be this relentless productivity machine. It's literally designed to save energy unless it absolutely has to spend it. Now this brings us to section 2, emotion, not time management. For years, we've all been told that procrastination is a time management problem, right? We just need a better planner, a stricter schedule, maybe a few more phone reminders. But researchers Fusha Siros at the University of Sheffield and Timothy Pyle at Carleton University spent years studying this, and they found that procrastination is actually an emotion regulation problem. You aren't avoiding that task because you don't know how to manage your calendar. You're avoiding it because you're trying to escape the negative feelings attached to it. Things like boredom, frustration, fear of judgment, or crippling self-doubt. A new calendar app literally cannot fix a feeling. When a task is attached to a negative emotion, your brain classifies that task as a threat. Which leads us directly into section 3, your brain under threat. So the absolutely crucial point here centers on your amygdala. That is your brain's threat detection center. It evolved to keep you alive in a world filled with physical dangers. It's fast, it's automatic, and it's incredibly powerful. But here is the catch. It cannot reliably distinguish between a real physical danger, like a wild predator, and an emotionally threatening task. To your amygdala, an intimidating email you've been putting off or a project you're terrified of failing at triggers the exact same avoidance signal as a physical threat. It's basically screaming, danger, move away, protect yourself. Stanford's Robert Sapolsky actually documented that once the stress response is activated by a perceived threat, it directly impairs your prefrontal cortex. Now, that's the part of your brain responsible for executive function, planning, starting, and sustaining tasks. It measurably shuts down. This is exactly why trying to just use sheer willpower when you're stressed is neurologically backwards. You are trying to use the very planning system that your threat response is already disabled to overcome the threat response itself. It's honestly like trying to put out a fire using the smoke. Let's move to section 4, why motivation comes last. Most of us sit around waiting for step 4 to happen before we ever take step 1. We wait to feel ready, we wait for inspiration to magically strike, but behavioral activation research consistently shows us that motivation is not a starting gun, it's a reward. Dopamine, which is the neurotransmitter that actually drives motivation, is released during the action, not before it. You have to take a small action, that's step 1, that creates a dopamine spark, step 2. That dopamine makes it easier to take more action, step 3. And then finally, you actually feel motivated. Waiting to feel motivated before you begin is entirely backwards to how your brain chemistry actually operates. Now, section 5, the power of self-compassion. Okay, before we talk about how to be kinder to ourselves, we really need to understand where this supposed laziness often comes from in the first place. Researcher Martin Seligman coined this concept called learned helplessness. This happens when people experience repeated failures or they're in environments where their effort just produces no result. Over time, the brain logically adapts by reducing the motivation to try. It just conserves energy. So what looks like a character flaw to you is often just a very logical nervous system adapting to an environment, maybe a harsh classroom growing up, a toxic previous job, or a highly critical upbringing where efforts simply didn't seem to yield results. Your brain learned a really hard lesson, and it stopped generating the drive to try. And this is exactly why punishing yourself is so wildly counterproductive. Look at this 2023 meta-analysis published in the Psychological Bulletin by researchers Rosenthal and Carl Bring. They compared task completion via willpower and discipline versus self-compassion. And the self-compassion group scored significantly higher. Why is that? Well, it's because self-criticism and shame are processed by your brain as social threats, which immediately re-triggers your amygdala. You shame yourself, your brain detects a threat, and it makes you avoid the task even more. Self-compassion, on the other hand, actively breaks this procrastination loop. By being kind to yourself after avoiding a task, you remove the emotional threat, which allows your prefrontal cortex to finally come back online. Which brings us to our final part, Section 6, start much, much smaller. Your new best friend is the number 2, as in the 2-minute rule. If procrastination is an emotion regulation problem, the solution is to make the task feel so small that it's no longer threatening. Studies on habit formation show that you need to reduce the activation energy required to begin. By shrinking the task down to just 2 minutes, you bypass the amygdala entirely. The threat detection system doesn't even wake up because a 2-minute task just isn't dangerous. Here's what making it smaller looks like in real life. Do not tell yourself you have to work on a project for 2 hours. That is a massive threat to your brain. Just tell yourself to open the document. That's it. Don't tell yourself you have to go to the gym for an hour. Just put on your shoes. You are actively reducing the perceived size of the threat. When the first step is this tiny and unthreatening, readiness isn't even required. And once you take that tiny step, your prefrontal cortex safely engages, that little dopamine spark fires, and suddenly the next step becomes exponentially easier. Which really brings us full circle. There's something you need to do today. You know what it is. But right now, you know something else too. The reason you haven't done it isn't some deep flaw in who you are. It is just an incredibly efficient nervous system responding to a perceived threat. You are not lazy, you never were, you are just operating a brain that occasionally needs you to make things a little less scary. So, knowing that your mind is really just trying to protect you, ask yourself, what is the absolute smallest, most laughably tiny 2-minute step you can take right now to prove your brain's alarm system wrong? Make it smaller and start there.